Hi, my name is Tom. Some of you might know me as Bowl of Salmon on Instagram. Today I'm introducing you to a new brand and the newest watch in my collection, the Sherpa OPS. Before summer I was commissioned to make photos and videos of these two new Sherpa models, and as soon as I unboxed them, they left an impression, and when I sent them back, that feeling lingered. As watch enthusiasts, we keep a list of watches that we want to add to the collection over time. And maybe you have more discipline than me, but sometimes something comes along out of left field and you have to follow your gut. Beside the tooly and stealthy look, there are two other factors that made me pull the trigger on this watch. The history and the engineering that went into this. The dial reads "Made in Germany", and like some other brands like Mercedes, BMW and Leica, there even is a German word to describe this. Gründlichkeit. Now chances are that Sherpa Watches won't ring a bell with you. Sherpa Watches is a newly founded brand that pays tribute to the old Enicar Sherpa models from the golden age of tool watches. They are not simply making an homage watch, they actually revived two cult classics and they didn't cut any corners doing so. One of the models is the Enicar Sherpa Ultradive, and the other one is the one we have here, that's the Sherpa OPS. Both are compressor dive watches from the late 60s. Enicar was a Swiss watchmaker, a family business founded in 1917 that operated for several decades. They produced up to 800,000 products every year, until they filed for bankruptcy in 1987. I'll refer to these as vintage Enicar, because the name was later bought by a Chinese investment group. And today, under that new name, Enicar is only making cheap fashion watches. Vintage Enicar is somewhat of a cult classic among vintage collectors, and they are highly collectible models. And if you start looking into these vintage pieces, it's easy to fall in love. Even Ed Sheeran owns an Ultradive. And if you are curious how a dive watch ended up on the wrist of a Sherpa on top of Mount Everest, well, I can highly recommend the book Time for a Change, Discovering Vintage Enicar. So why didn't I go vintage? Well, highly collectible watches do well on the secondary market, and they have a pretty solid price point too. And with these new models, you get the looks and the technology built to modern day standards and materials. Now let's take a closer look at the specs, and we will deep dive a bit into the engineering that went into this watch too. The watch features a DLC-coated black case that measures 40mm in diameter and sits just 13.5mm high. This is a super compressor ISO certified dive watch rated up to 200 meters of water resistance. I would normally dive into the details of the dial first, but it's probably the unusual case shape with the dual crown layout that will draw your attention first. So let's start with that. The OPS or OPS features their DLC-coated bayonet compressor case that measures 40mm in diameter, excluding the dual crown layout and crown protection. Both the case size and crown protection guards are identical to the original Sherpa models. The monoflex compressor crown technology has been brought back and built up from the ground. The term super compressor is to many people a dive watch with two crowns. One crown is used to wind the movement and set the time, the other one rotates an internal bezel to measure elapsed time on a dive. But it's not just a two-crown look here, this is a true super compressor. The term super compressor refers to a patented case sealing method developed by watch case manufacturer Irvin Piqueres. The patented case design takes advantage of water pressure to press the case back against the O-ring seal. More depth equals more water pressure equals greater seal. Back in the day, rubber seals weren't as reliable as the ones we have today, so instead of putting full pressure on the seals at all time when the watch wasn't in the water, a compressor only puts pressure when needed. It's crazy that this monoflex crown technology uses non-screw down crowns. Non-screw down crowns on a dive watch. So these crowns use a tubular shaped sealing which slides over the tube, which comes out of the watch. And again, water pressure helps to press the seal more firmly onto the tube. The crown guards are there in order for the user not to get snagged while in use. The top crown moves the inner bezel and the bottom crown is used to set the date and time. If you want to know more about the technical stuff, the Sherpa Watches website has a series of more in-depth articles. This also shows how much effort went into the development by basically reinventing the technology. The black stuff on the case isn't just some black paint with a fancy name. DLC stands for diamond-like carbon, so it borrows the superpower from diamond: hardness. DLC coating is harder than raw steel, so the case has an increased durability and scratch resistance. Onto the dial. Well, the design is of course entirely based on the legacy models. A very legible combination of white, grey and orange accents that stand out against the deep black dial and the DLC coated case. The inner dive bezel isn't accompanied by your typical ASMR click sound, but instead it features a bidirectional friction bezel. A very rewarding amount of friction is felt when you silently move it around, allowing for a free and precise control. The sloped subtrack runs around the dial and has an inverted color scheme layout on the first 15 minutes, with loomed orange markers every 5 minutes and numerals every other 10 minutes. The brand logo and name is printed at 12 o'clock, and at 6 we find the words OPS and automatic. At the 3 o'clock we find a date window that doesn't break the symmetry on the dial, featuring a white date wheel and a red font just like most of the original watches. Sherpa is a 100% European product, using mostly Swiss and German partners. Not one screw is made in Asia, so all the way at the bottom of the dial we see the words "Made in Germany." For the hands we find a faceted minute and hour hand with satin finish and loom in the center. The needle-shaped second hand sweeping around the dial is coated with custom orange Swiss Superluminova Grade X1. I especially like the look of that coating under macro, and that specially developed orange loom day glow is so good to look at. If we quickly jump over to the other model that they released, of course the polished steel case on the Ultradive gives the watch a different look. But the Ultradive also has a different dial layout with a white outer track for the inner bezel, an applied logo, applied indices and 3D loom plots. The acrylic of the vintage Enicar has been replaced by a more scratch-proof box sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating. By using an internal black coating on the edges, the milky ring reflection you would normally get has been eliminated and the watch still maintains a more vintage aesthetic. Inside the watch is a more modest, yet tried and tested Sellita SW200-1 with a 38-hour power reserve. It's a premium version of the movement with gilt finish and custom decorations like Geneva striping and perlage, with a custom-built tungsten rotor. The brand founder is a practicing Buddhist, and to find a way to connect to the legacy of the Sherpa, that are also Buddhist, 2 of the movement wheels have been micro-laser engraved with a Buddhist mantra that acts as a Tibetan prayer wheel. I think this is the first time I'll defend or even discuss a price point on a watch here on the channel. These models are available for 5,800 euros. That's probably a big ask from a new company, but this needs some perspective though. This isn't a micro brand starting with a tryout first release, testing the waters via crowdfunding. They are coming out of the gates with a serious watch, the watch they wanted to create, without cutting any corners. Finding investors, doing the whole research and development, sourcing partners, recreating Bayonet compressor technology that was hidden for 60 years. And while I think that this price point will be a difficult marketing challenge for the brand, do I think it's worth it? Yes. As soon as you handle the watch, you feel that this is a premium product. And if you are looking to buy a vintage Enicar, they are around the same price point but nowhere near a mint condition. I think that the only thing missing so people would accept this price point better is some hype. Hype that other watch brands seem to enjoy on the major news outlets. On the wrist, the OPS sits exceptionally well. It has the right amount of heft to it without feeling either light or heavy. The overall finish of the case and dial feels very premium and rugged. The watch comes on a very comfortable Joseph Bonny vulcanized rubber strap, and with the lugs bending down, the watch hugs the wrist perfect. One of the things that attracted me to this watch were some photos I found from the vintage Enicar watches, worn on NATO straps. And I'm happy to see that the new version pairs really well with different color NATOs too. I know that this is a dive watch by design, but it's the toolwatch and fieldwatch vibes that won me over. In a way, this watch also represents a next step in my journey with watches. As an enthusiast, away from the hype, away from the norm. Maybe I was looking for some sort of self-validation where I prove I don't just need or want hype watches. I know I'll feel super confident taking this one on trips or bringing this guy to the table on a next watch meetup. Anyway, I'm super curious what your initial impressions are of these watches. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I hope you liked the video, share some love by subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.